All right.
So this looks good.
I think we're live. So we've got Instagram Live and we've got YouTube Live. Let's see. We're going to give just a few seconds to folks. We're going to give just a few seconds to folks.
We got a double echo live track on there as well.
We're just going to give some time for a few folks to jump on the YouTube one at the very least. Let's see. Cool. I think we're there.
We ready for? You want me to start things off?
Yeah.
Set up some questions.
Let's do it. Let's go ahead and get started.
All right. So everybody, thanks for joining us today. Again, for those of you just joining us or just coming in on the YouTube Live, which there's two cameras to look at here. I'm AJ Holmes. This is Saxon McClama. We are the co-founders, co-owners of Negative Supply, based in sunny Southern California, here in Ventura County. So we're coming to you live from our headquarters in Camarillo. We're in this awesome little industrial park with tons of other craftspeople that do incredible work in all sorts of different industries. Many of our neighbors get to do work for Negative Supply, and we're really proud to support the local economy here. So the whole purpose of today's live is to really answer a lot of exciting questions about a product launch that has been really the better part of a year, if not more than a year at this point in the making, and that is our light meter LM1, a handheld instant color and our color temperature and light meter that we've been absolutely thrilled and floored to have so much early support on with our Kickstarter that is live now with early bird tiers still rolling. So again, so incredibly gracious for the support so far, but there've been several really good questions. We wanted to take this opportunity to come to you live, answer those questions plus a few more. And the way the format's going to work for today, I'm sure Saxon's going to have a little introduction, but I'm actually going to read the questions to Saxon from the audience. We've had a lot of questions submitted and others that have just been posted in comments. And then he's going to have time to really go into detail for you. But I guess maybe at the top of this, Saxon, we should mention that at the end of this live event, we're going to be sharing some very exciting news about stretch goal updates to our Kickstarter campaign. So stay tuned, hang on with us. We're going to answer some really great questions, and then we'll talk about some exciting stuff at the very end.
Yeah, just to kick off too, you guys will obviously see our shop behind us. This is mostly our prototyping area. There's obviously a lot of tools and stuff sitting around, but for those of you who haven't seen the Negative Supply HQ, it's a work in progress. We got to California about a year and a half ago now, right at the start of the pandemic, and we've been very fortunate to continue operations. So we'd actually love to share a little bit more about our shop at some point in the future. So if that's something you guys want to see, let us know. Looks like we've got already some folks joined in on both the YouTube Live and on the Instagram Live. We're going to focus on the YouTube Live just because that particular computer is right in front of us. So that's the camera we're going to be looking at. For those of you on Instagram Live, we're still here. We're still paying attention. We'll try to keep up with some of the comments. But if you notice us looking off, it's just because we're looking at the computer as the main camera. Cool. I guess let's get started.
Great. So again, quite a few questions came through. We're going to try and work through really as many of these as we can. Saxon, at the top of the list, we had some folks just wanting to see a little bit of a hands-on demonstration. Do you have a meter here that's charged up?
Yeah, so I've got a couple different meters that I've been carrying around and using quite a bit. One of the ones that I haven't shown off as much, at least in the Kickstarter, has actually been the slate gray. As most of you know, our meters are CNC aluminum or brass. I've also got one of the brass models here. These particular devices have all of the electronics on the inside. It's pretty compact in there, but it's still a good size of for the device itself. I really like the slate, and I like it because it's a very, very high gloss anodized finish. For those of you that are technical and know about anodizing, or those of you that want to know a little bit more about anodizing, these are actually machined, and then they're taken to a tumbling process that removes a lot of the burrs and breaks the edges. They're then corn-cobbed. That actually gives them a high polish. For the slate, especially if there's any areas that need to be hand buffed, they'll be hand buffed as well. And these are done right down the street here in Camarillo. One of the things that I really like about the slate, though, is it tends to pick up colors from around the room, and that's because the finish is so bright for an anodized. You actually see some of the refractions from the metal itself. So again, this is the LM1 in the slate gray. This is our mid-tier option. Haven't had as many people back that particular option. I think we haven't done a good enough job at just showing how beautiful these particular meters are. And so that's what we're going to try to do over the next couple of days, is just make sure people understand that the slate gray, the green, and our metallic silver are really special, and a lot of work goes into making sure that those look just a little bit better maybe than some of the black ones. Our black is actually the same finish we've been putting on our products for a while, and we've gotten really, really good at figuring out the formulations for it. But we're happy to introduce colors and options for people to personalize these devices in a way that we couldn't have done with things like film carriers.
That's awesome. And one thing I was going to add, Saxon, this is a prototype. So this still has an in-house produced back, but the shipping models are going to have a CNC machined matching aluminum back. Is that right?
It is. And one of the big things that I think we don't spend enough time talking about, and we'll probably add some more details on, is this button at the front is metal. On the prototypes, it's not, but it will be metal. These side buttons will actually be metal as well. These will be very tactile. They'll be very easy to press, and you'll have some feedback when you've clicked them correctly. I guess, do we want to do like a demo and show how the meter reading is taken?
That's fine, but I want to make sure the folks on Instagram Live can see the meter as well.
Give them a little bit of a heads up.
Yeah. And for those of you watching on Instagram Live, I assume we're going to be making this YouTube video available once we're done. So would love for you to be able to, get high-res footage and really watch all this at your leisure.
They can zoom in on the prototyping station I've got back there that I forgot to clean up this morning. Yeah, let me show this off real quick. So I'm going to step a little bit closer.
Why don't you turn the
camera?
Yeah, that way folks on live Instagram can see it as well.
We've got the phone propped up on a basic riser over here with a phone mount, and it actually works pretty well. So if you look at the meter, there's 3 buttons on the side. This is an up button, a down button, and a mode/select button. And then here you'll actually see the meter button. This is not a dial. It's not anything like that. This is actually meant to be ambidextrous. The reason we went with a large button is so that people could click it regardless of which hand they're using the meter with. The side buttons are used to select things like the mode. So right now it's going to actually read the shutter speed because we've selected ISO and aperture. If we press and hold the middle button on the side and we just give it half a second, it'll actually switch modes. I'm going to give it just a moment, and I'm going to do that for us. So now we've got it in a mode that will tell us the aperture that we'd like to use. The aperture that it would read based on the shutter speed and the ISO, and then it would go to the ISO as well. I'm going to get us back to our standard mode. This is the mode that would show us the shutter speed. If you're like me, you might set your camera to f2 or f2.8 or whatever your camera has. You might set your ISO to whatever your film stock is. And what you want your meter to do is you might want it to tell you exactly the shutter speed to program. So let's say we want to change from f2 to something like f2.8. We'd simply press the down button. We'd press the select button. And then once it's selected, we can go up or down. There's been a lot of questions about the ranges that we can do on this. I know we're going to get to some of those, but if we answer it now, maybe we don't have to break out time for it. We're going to actually make sure that this will work, obviously, at things as low as f1, maybe f1, f.95. Maybe we have some people with some of those lenses, but it'll also go up. We can go to 64 or f1.28. So let's see. I'm going to say, let's just pretend we're shooting at f4. So I've just selected f4.
And Saxon, if it's just a matter of programming, and I say just because I don't know much about that, but I would think we could even try and go to, say, like f256 for people doing pinhole exposures.
Right.
That could be really cool.
Absolutely. That's the cool thing about this. We're building a platform that allows us to really have a lot of control over the software. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the light meter, the LM1, and this is in the slate gray color. I just gave a quick demo about changing some of the settings. To those on Instagram Live, you'll see that I've just changed ISO to 800. I've changed the aperture to f4, and it's already changed the meter reading. I'm going to move it in front of our light here. So then it's gone to 320. And then if I move it in front of the window, it's actually very close because we've got a pretty balanced lighting in here. It's 1/400th if I get closer to the window. You'll notice just up here at the top, we've got a battery indicator. On our demo units, this is actually a fixed indication, so you might have seen a lot of photos with the battery level always at that same spot. We haven't quite gotten to that part of the programming, but that's definitely an easy thing we want to solve. And then lastly, we've got EV measurements. So 1/400th,
Questions on here.
but what's the EV? Well, we've got that measurement there at the top. I'm trying to think of anything else that I want to show off. Maybe we can circle back and do one more demo at the end.
Let's go through
for everybody else,
because I think it's going to involve a lot of hands-on time with that meter.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So the next question, we actually got this a few different places, and really just a miss on us not mentioning this sooner. But one writer asks, does it only do 1/3 stops, or will it also do half and whole stop measurements? Saxon?
Yeah, it's as easy as us programming that. If anybody has feedback they'd like to give us around that, as of right now, our plan is to do a 1/3 and half stops on it. That's not really, I think, anything different than what's already out there, and I think it'll be pretty easy to swap between those modes.
And it could even be, I think if it does 1/3, half, and whole stops are really useful if you're using an older camera, like the Summicron lens I'm borrowing from Saxon only does whole stops, and the shutter speed only does whole stops.
Mm-hmm.
So, a meter that can do whole stops as well would be cool. But again, these are all things that are pretty simple to add with in software. And so if you have things like that you are just absolutely adamant that needs to be in there, let us know, because this is still something that we're making improvements to.
Absolutely. I've got a few questions here in the chat that I'm going to circle back around to. There's actually multiple people asking about the brass with no finish. Should we answer that now, or what do you think?
I'm cool with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go grab one to show you. We've thought about the brass with no finish on it. It tarnishes very quickly. When you think of brass, you do have to think of it kind of like spigots or like water hose fittings. They turn brown pretty fast. We are looking at possibly offering it with some sort of plating. Like obviously gold would be great if we felt like there was a budget and people wanted it to be gold plating. Just gonna read a comment here. But let me go grab one real quick, and maybe you can jump to the next question while I'm gone.
Yeah, sure. So there's quite a few questions here, but one of the next ones that was important to me, it's kind of like the same thing as the f-stop range. It's asking about the ISO range of the meter, and really whether you're shooting paper negatives with silver gelatin paper at ISO 4 or 6. Or if you're shooting, Delta 3200 push 2 or 3 stops, the meter needs to be able to do all of that. So it's going to have an incredibly wide range. Even the working prototype has a very wide range, but it's just a matter of programming. So that's, again, something that's very easy for us to implement. And Saxon, we got a question here about meter lock, and I guess that's talking about locking exposure. I'm not really sure. Probably need to get a bit more clarification on that question, in all honesty. And Saxon went ahead and answered the next one. Does it read EVs? And it does. That readout is actually constantly on the top right of the screen, so you always have it visible.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just wanted to double check that our audio was coming through, so I wanted to message a few folks. Cool. I've got, you had just asked about EVs and stuff like that. Wonderful. Mm-hmm. What was the one right before that?
All it says is meter lock. So I think that's about basically locking exposure.
So it could also mean like locking settings, and that's something that we've done. So right now, if you bumped these buttons, it wouldn't really mess with the settings. You actually have to select the variable, the ISO or the aperture in this case, and then actually confirm that selection before you can change things. So if you're in the studio, it's pretty easy to make sure that it's not going to bump around. But I did bring back a brass one. This is actually one that I carried around for a few weeks. If you came out to one of the camera shows in Long Beach, you might have even seen it in person. But this is what it looks like after, I actually think it's been about a month since it was machined and polished. It does look beautiful, but if you notice, like, it's already very, very, very tarnished. There's a question Kevin asked about like clear anodizing it. We could do like a clear lacquer or something like that.
You can't anodize brass.
Yeah, you can anodize it. You can plate it. The big worry though with anything that's a coating over brass that's not a strong coating is that when it does start tarnishing and degrading, the metal itself starts to basically work from under the coating, and so you might start having bubbles and things. I think there's actually been Leicas did that. I think some of the early plating options on brass did that. So it's definitely something we're looking into. My background is in materials engineering. I don't know everything about it, but I definitely know a few things to stay away from. But I would love a solid brass one that is brass as well. We'll see. Good news on that is if we come out with different colors for brass and you're already backing the brass, we'll give you the option to switch colors at the very end, just like with the mid-tier. If you've selected the mid-tier at the very end of the Kickstarter is when you select your color. So don't feel like you're locked in. But if you do want a color or you do want brass, you need to back those particular tiers.
Yep. Great. So Saxon, one question that I kind of answered a moment ago, but I would love for you to opine on it. ISO range of the meter, I assume it's much like the f-stop range. It's going to be, it's already very wide in the prototypes, but we'll widen it even further for the shipping models. I'm quite certain.
Yeah, we know that some of the newer cameras can go extremely high on that ISO range. We might, for the sake of simplicity, not go to like 1 million or something, but we'll see what's possible and what makes the most sense based on some of your feedback.
Yeah, and I mean, for me personally, I've shot Delta 3200 and T-Max 3200 developed at 12,800 before, but I think beyond 25,000 or so is probably getting to the point where how useful is it really to have? But let us know, because again, those are decisions that are being made. The next question's pretty exciting, and maybe there'll be a little bit more information about this soon, but flash and strobe support?
Yeah, I guess more information to come, but like we hear you guys. We know that that's been something you've wanted. Not only do we hear you now, but we've kind of predicted that, and so we've already started doing our research on that. Looking back, probably
since January.
A couple months now. We've been more recently looking into it. We know we needed to hit very specific funding goals for us to effectively add some of these features. We've been blown away by the support of this Kickstarter in a way that we didn't really imagine right off the bat. And so I think that, some of these very specific requests, especially around flash metering, I think we'll also have some exciting news. I do see a couple comments here. Thank you, Matt Day. Great to see you guys. There's a great one about the shiny surface affecting the meter reading. We're trying to make sure that it doesn't. Because of the angle of the surface, shouldn't see any interactions. That is a really good question, though. And yeah, awesome cameras. That's great to see there. Awesome cameras put on the camera show down in Long Beach recently. That's where we showed off the brass meter.
We actually have a question here that would echo a couple of the comments you have here, which is asking about, will it have spot metering? And I know it's kind of been one we've heard a few times already.
Yeah, this particular meter, it's not a spot meter. We set out to build this meter as the absolute best pocketable incident light meter that we possibly could. That means that it does its particular assigned task extremely well. We know that there is a need for spot meters. There's a want for spot meters out there. But we are very much focused on this particular one at the moment, and that's exactly what we're launching. We don't have anything else to launch.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great, and it's been a back and forth. But me even using this little LM1, I've been using several prototypes over the last couple months. As someone who's used to bulkier meters, just carrying this thing around with me and almost forgetting to even have it. Is a brilliant thing. It doesn't interrupt your creative flow, that kind of flow state when you're making a photograph, and I haven't missed it.
Yeah, I'm going to sprinkle in some of these questions. Brian Caparici just asked about the tap and die case. So this is actually first gen. We worked over the weekend to look at the case. First gen has the flap just centered. As it turns out, that actually puts a little too much pressure over the display. And so on the one that we've produced for the Kickstarter, it's the snap will be to the side, which puts the pressure directly over a very strong part of the meter. That prevents us from having any issues with the screen. Justin at Tap and Die actually has both of the cases. He's using them to create the patterns. So I unfortunately didn't get to bring one back with me from New York, but just so you guys can see this beautiful bourbon leather, these beautiful brass rivets. He's even got some wonderful stitching on the inside. You can see here. This thing came together better than I could have ever expected. It's got a belt loop. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Justin does some of the best work. Attachment for a lanyard, yes. Thank you so much for that particular question. These prototypes don't have an attachment point for the lanyard. When we were building these prototypes, I didn't know how much room I'd need on the inside for the electronics when I submitted the order for the CNC parts. So I actually left out the lanyard attachment just for the prototypes. Our final version will have a lanyard attachment point. Should I go into detail about that with the locking pin?
I think we kind of cover that in the campaign. I guess the best thing to note really is that you can use your favorite wrist strap or lanyard. Mm-hmm. The Tap and Die one is another great option, and it matches the case beautifully. But did you want to add anything to the machine properties for it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you'll be able to do with the meter is take off the back and remove a pin. You can then drop in a lanyard of your choice if you want to, place that pin back into place, and then lock the back on. Unless the back of the meter flies off, you're not going to have to worry about your lanyard coming unattached. It's a very, very strong part.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Let me move through a couple more of these questions here, and then we'll take some of these YouTube and Instagram questions at the very end.
Okay.
So, accuracy versus other mainstream meters on the market today.
That's a really good question. Obviously, we want it to be accurate. I have somewhat of a scientific background. Through university, I spent a lot of time doing research and comparing results. And some of that actually correlated to things like, I guess, calibration. That's a big thing. We know that we have a set of sensors and we have a processor, and we can interpolate that data in a way that makes sense for us photographically, but we can also interpolate that data and make sure that it's accurate. And so there's going to be a calibration process that we use for these. Right now, it was all by hand. It was like, let me take a meter reading, let me change a couple lines of code, let me back up, let me take another meter reading, let me adjust it. And to be transparent, it's actually a pretty accurate meter right out of the box. I think it's been like 5% off at any point in time, 5% of a stop. So that's not even a third stop.
It's not even a 10th stop.
Right. So keep that in mind. We are thinking about accuracy. By all means, we want to make sure that this is as accurate as possible.
And that's also something that's going to be refined and fine-tuned for the shipping models. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing that people think when they see a Kickstarter, myself included, because I've backed several Kickstarters over the years, but at Negative Supply, when we bring something to Kickstarter, we don't believe in vaporware. So we want real-life working prototypes that can circulate the globe and let us generate feedback before we even bring it to this point. Mm-hmm. The final shipping version is going to have numerous material improvements before it ever leaves this facility.
We actually got a really good question that I think you have as well, and I know I've seen it, asking about the battery being replaceable. Mm-hmm. So we don't know how to talk about this yet because we've never done integrated batteries. So what we don't know how to talk about is, can we tell our customers to open their device and mess with a lithium battery? That's what we want to find out. What we can tell you is that we're using an industry standard rechargeable battery connecting plug, and the back of the device will come off. We're going to find out some of the details about it being like how much can we tell you to do yourself. But at the end of the day, we're building this off of a lot of open source best practices.
But we're also using an incredibly high quality battery that can withstand a tremendous number of full charges and has incredibly long life. I don't think that that's something that you're going to need to be replacing with any sort of frequency. Mm-hmm. And as with any other Negative Supply product, it will come equipped with a warranty if anything odd was to happen.
Yeah, do you want to talk about it? 2 years.
Yeah, 2-year warranty is standard on all Negative Supply products. We know the industry standard for most things is about 12 months. We always want to do a little better than that at a minimum. And then if something wild was to happen, just reach out to us. We certainly don't predict that, but I'll tell you, the battery is not something, considering the quality of the one we're using. I think that is a very low likelihood that you're really going to need to be replacing the lithium battery inside. Certainly not for many years.
They have a shelf life, but one of the important things with batteries is how often they're charged and discharged. With the longer battery life of this, you're likely not going to charge it more than once a week. Most people will charge it once a month.
Right.
That's going to reduce the number of cycles and lengthen its lifespan. Also want to say thank you to Kevin. It looks like he actually just jumped on and pledged and left a comment. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
And thanks again, Jay, for the question about the battery.
All right, so let's keep rolling here. Yeah, that was actually the very next question. That is hilarious.
Cool.
So what type of sensor are you using? Is it an RGB sensor?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's actually multiple sensors on the inside of the device. This one this is probably the best way to see it. We've got 2 sensors in this one. There's a third that I pulled off of this particular prototype because I was kind of messing with a few things and needed to remove it. But yeah, we're going to have multiple sensors. One of them is RGB, so that's what gives color temperature. The other one is an impulse reading lux sensor. But the cool thing about the RGB sensor is it also does lux, so we can use that to compare values, and we can use it to be, it can average, or maybe they can overlap and help calibration. But the interesting thing about our impulse sensor that does lux is it also has both IR and visible spectrum. Don't have anything to share about this yet, but there's a possibility that we could have it read just IR or just visible or both. Obviously, for traditional meter readings, it does a little of both, but yeah, so some cool things with the sensors. And we haven't really necessarily finalized everything, but what I will say is with electronic components being so hard to get, we've actually already started stockpiling the core sensors that will do most of the reading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we've had several questions about reading color temperature with the LM1. And so really just the kind of generic question here is they're just asking for a little bit more clarity on how the color meter works, why it's important, and how to use it.
So it will tell you Kelvin values because the screen is a limited size and because we want to just include the information that's necessary. It will give you Kelvin values, thousands and hundreds. So meaning when you're taking a reading, it might say 5.5K, that's 5,500. It might say 3.2K, it might say 6.8K. These are all things that you might want to take into consideration in a couple scenarios. The 2 most common being if you're trying to decide on a particular film stock. So for example, if you're inside and you want to double check that the lighting is tungsten before you pull out maybe some of the CineStill film, or if you're a cinematographer and you're trying to decide exactly how to set up some of your external lighting. You might want to read maybe the light coming through the window, read your light source that you have, and if it's adjustable, you can adjust that or add filters accordingly.
Great. And yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest takeaways for the color temperature reading is that it's useful for film photographers like us. We all love shooting CineStill, and I have a couple boxes of old Portra 100 tungsten that I'm actually really excited to use now that I have an affordable meter that can kind of give me some guidance. But it is a huge feature for those in the cinema world, and we're really excited to have that.
Brian Caparici also mentioned something. He mentioned that it's game changer for even digital shooters, and I think that's absolutely right. If you want to take a photo on film and then maybe you're a hybrid shooter and you're also taking photos on digital, being able to reference the actual digital color temperature of the scene you just captured so that your scans and your digital files match, that's huge.
Yeah, instead of just guessing or going in a custom white balance and hunting around, you know exactly where you need to be. Yeah, that's really great. So we have a question that's asking about the differences and advantages over other recently launched light meters. And I think just in general, we look at, other folks that are running small design and manufacturing businesses in this industry as friends, not foes. They're not adversaries. I don't really think either of us would want to directly compare to, what somebody else is doing.
Yeah, and I guess one of the important things is that we built an incident meter. I think a lot of the camera-mounted meters that are out there, those particular meters used a very specific, I'm trying trying to think of the best. They're not spot meters necessarily, although there has been some wonderful spot meters out there, but they're using basically the same type of metering method that your phone would use, or maybe a camera would use. In those situations, when you're using some of the camera top meters, you really need to be pointing it at a neutral gray card in order to get an accurate reading. When you're using an incident meter, that's not necessarily true. With an incident meter, when the light hits the sensor after having gone through the diffusion panel, it's going to give you an accurate reading because it doesn't need anything to reference. When you're using a camera top meter, if you point it at a black shirt versus a white shirt, you're going to get two different readings. If you hold an incident meter in front of either of those, you're going to get the same reading. And so that's why people like me and AJ, who've shot weddings for 10 years, that's why that's been our preferred option is the incident meter. I've also got a couple more questions we'll get to. One of the questions is in regards to flash, just as a mid call or mid live announcement. For those of you that just joined, towards the end of this particular live, we're going to start talking a little bit more about some of the stretch goals and some of the next plans. If you're just joining us, thank you. I don't know how long it's going to go, but stick around till the end and we might release a few bits of information.
Yeah, and so we have about 15, 20 minutes left before the rest of our negative supply team gets back from lunch and it gets really busy in here again. Before we go into other questions, Saxon, I did just get a comment saying that folks on IG Live did not see the brass version and did not see that case. So let's show that off again for a moment. Make sure everybody can see this.
So this is one of the brass enclosures. Kind of see some of the insides of the device. You can see some of the sensors there. Not all of them. Have pulled out a few just for testing purposes. And then the case, tap and die. Again, this is one of the early prototypes. The new one has it shifted down a little bit so that the button is pressing not into the screen, but rather into the enclosure. So yeah, hopefully that's what they wanted to see.
Great. Thanks for that. And let's see, let me switch screens here. When will it be available on the open market? That's a good question.
I mean, I feel like right now my gut reaction is to say like 2022.
Yeah, early in the year.
Yeah, Kickstarter is really where we're going to put our effort in this time. You know, we've always really prioritized those Kickstarter orders before we release it to the general public. Not only do you get a better price when you back through Kickstarter, but you're prioritized in shipments. We want to make sure that everybody on Kickstarter has an opportunity to get their meter first before we send it out into the world through our other avenues. I guess this is probably a good time to mention we do have a little under 2 days or a little over 2 days left for early birds. That's where you get a little bit better pricing.
A little under 2 days.
Yeah, a little under 2 days. You get better pricing on some of the tiers. They are prioritized for shipping as well. And then on the brass models, they are limited edition. Our brass meters, which this is one that I've pre-weathered just to give you guys an idea of what it will look like after years of use. The first 100 are actually numbered in their launch edition for Kickstarter. They're not completely gone, but if you want one, you want the lower number. So you probably want to back sooner than later. Nobody wants number 95. They want number 50.
That's hilarious. All right. So yeah, no, I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind. And especially like if you're thinking maybe there's a retailer you usually like to shop with, it's probably going to be several months realistically before those are really available there. Because we got to fulfill all of the Kickstarter orders, which we're going to do as quickly as possible beginning this year. And then we're going to have to fill the rest of those into early 2022, perhaps. And then we move into launching on our store and through other retail partners. So, you're looking at some time there for sure. All right. So do we ship international? And what about customs and things like that?
Yeah, I'm just going to move this camera a little bit. We're balancing, trying to make sure that the YouTube and the Instagram Live is going to stay in the same spot. We do ship internationally. We actually have been shipping internationally for almost 2 years now. You pay customs on anything that you have imported into your country. I'm trying to think of anything related. That's pretty normal.
That is normal, but there's another reason why it's great to back on the Kickstarter. You're going to be backing at a lower price. So if you're international and you come back, you decide you want to buy it in a few months and pay the full retail price, that's fine if that's what you plan to do. but it's going to ship with that full retail price shown on the import documents. And so you'll pay taxes on that portion as well. The other thing is our international shipping right now on Kickstarter, it's a flat $20. In the past, on our previous Kickstarters, we've had shipping by tiers to different countries and different zones. And some of it got really, really expensive, $60+ in some cases. We're not doing that this time around. It's a flat $20 anywhere in the world. And we also ship very quickly via UPS Expedited. And I'm sure most of those packages will have a signature requirement as well. We'll make sure it gets to you safely and quickly.
Yeah, I saw Brian Caparici might have messaged us a question, but I don't think I can pull it up right now because I'm on Instagram Live. So Brian, if you do want to ask that question, drop it into the YouTube Live and I'll see it there. A couple of people asking about shipping lithium batteries. We're going to make sure this thing's certified so that it can fly. The lithium battery has battery management circuitry built in that regulates the voltage so that it can't under or over charge itself. So when it's in transit, it's safe. The big problem with international shipping is typically shipping things with external lithium-ion batteries. So that's definitely a good question, though. I think that was awesome cameras there. Joey?
Joey, ready? Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks, Joey. So I know we've got a few more questions here. Let me make sure we go through the last on our other list. A few folks asking about the price point of the LM1 and perhaps why it might be higher to some people. Saxon, I have a couple thoughts, but I'm sure you have a few as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple reasons that we price our products the way we do. We actually have about the same margins on every single product. There's not a lot of fluff anywhere. We are dealing with hundreds and low thousands of units. We're not dealing with tens of thousands or millions of units. The big thing for us is that we hand assemble every product here at our workshop. The people that we work with are some of the most amazing and influential people in our lives. We've been so fortunate through COVID to continue to grow. We've onboarded new people through COVID, and we've retained a level of expertise that I didn't think was possible. By manufacturing ourselves each and every product, it gets better and better. Not only are you having just a constant feedback loop with people who not only use the products but make the products, but you're helping to support the innovation that happens. Our price points are where they are for a lot of different reasons, but one of the biggest ones is that we really believe in doing things the right way when it comes to manufacturing. There's not a ton of products out there that are made by the company that designs them. And that's one of the things that we really wanted to get back to basics on. We design products, we conceptualize products, but we also build products. We keep people employed and we keep people focused on products that they really, really, really enjoy using themselves. And I think at the end of the day, that's a much better outcome. It also gives us a lot of flexibility if people want something to change with a product at some point in the future. We don't have to retool an entire assembly line. We can make changes very quickly and really respond to the user feedback that's there. And last but not least, we can launch products that have much lower quantity requirements.
Yeah.
Obviously a good example is our most expensive product, the 8x10 system. We couldn't have made that happen if we were outsourcing our manufacturing. We were able to launch with very low quantities and really provide a solution to a void that was there. We think the same thing is true with this light meter.
So just one or two more quick things on that. When me and Saxon moved to Ventura County in March of 2020, it was me and Saxon and then a friend who came on to work as well. We're now very quickly approaching our 10th employee or our 10th team member in just over a little better than a year since then, like 16 months. And that is directly because of the support of the industry. That Foam Carrier 120 Kickstarter was a springboard for negative supply. And some of the support we gained or gleaned from that really allowed us to launch things like our Light Source Pro, our Light Source Basic, the ProRiser Mark II. The list goes on and on. And we look for this Kickstarter to do a very similar thing. These are big events for us. We put a lot of energy into them. And then another thing, I guess more on the material reason why the price might be perceived as high. Saxon has an unwavering, unyielding commitment to sourcing the finest components. Sometimes, we'll find a really great component, and then obviously we're always going to try and shop around and do it as great as we want to do it, as affordably as we can, so that we can pass that down. But at the end of the day, we're not willing to sacrifice form or function at negative supply.
You know my favorite one?
What's that?
This is such a small thing, but because we're in the workshop, I feel like we can show it, and hopefully I don't just drop all of these. These are the thumb screws that we actually use to attach things to our pro mount plates, and they attach our hood, and they attach a lot of other products. The only things that I could find at any sort of reasonable price were plastic. If they were metal, they were coming and they were in incredibly bad quality. And so now we have these custom machined thumb screws that we can adapt to multiple products. And I think that's really, really cool, because it just shows that we're truly looking for the best options for our products long term. We're building custom parts when there's not a solution out there.
Awesome. So we have about 10, 12 minutes left. Got a couple more questions here. There's someone asking about software updates. And is this going to be something that we can update over time should the need arise?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of how much we let out.
I think for me, the big thing here is that we're making refinements to software now. Not me. Saxon and a team of a couple other folks that are helping with development.
Sanan was on a second ago. I saw him watching it. He helps us with programming.
Yeah, hey Sanan. So the thing is, we're aiming to, when this production model is actually shipping, all of these big software improvements we need are in there. But at the same time, if we find out there's a need or a desire for further support or other feature sets, if I'm not mistaken, that's something you can add through a firmware update?
Yeah, so we're not ready to share every little detail of how we've produced this particular product. There's still a lot of things that are changing and things that haven't been locked in, so it'd be crazy to say it now, because it might switch up. But we're using currently industry standard Atmel processors on the inside that can run industry standard programming languages. I'll leave it at that. You guys can kind of fill in the blanks if you're that type person. We're also looking at, for example, the RP2040, like one of the newest and most exciting processors that's out there. We're building this to be a computer with an amazing 168 by 144 memory display made by Sharp. It's actually the type of display you see a lot in wearables, because it's very low power consumption, but it has extremely sharp text that's viewable in very bright sunlight, and it reacts much faster than e-ink. And so we're building a system that can be modified based on the needs. Our air compressor is coming on, so hopefully you guys can still hear us. If not, I'm going to give away all the juicy details and you're not going to hear it. No, so we're building something that can be adapted. What we want to do, though, is we want to really focus on the features that we know we need to bring it to market, and then start looking at things like software updates down the road that users can perform themselves. I think that's something that's really, really important. Brian says he can't hear us. I do have a couple other questions, just real quick. It looked like, who was it? Someone had asked about the strap attachment point. I think that was Abe. I don't have the unit with me right now that has that, but the strap attachment point uses a locking pin mechanism, so you can swap in and out different straps.
And it's very secure.
Mm-hmm.
So, Saxon, one more question on my page here, then you can hit a few more of these. Asking about a cinema mode and if it will have the ability to read T-stops, frame rates, things like that.
Yeah, I think that actually goes hand in hand with the last part of the conversation about it being user upgradable with software updates that we send out. What we're trying to do is, again, trying to figure out what we want on the shipping product. If enough of you want it to have a cinema mode, let us know and we'll try to make that happen. I think that's a very, very good call out.
Yeah.
We're eyeing things like custom shutter speeds. You might want 1/148 to match your 24 frames a second. You might also want it to read T-stops instead of f-stops. Those are all things that we can make happen. We just need you to tell us what you want. And we need your friends to back it so that we have transparently the financial support to pay for programming.
Yeah.
Again, we're building a computer here, and computers are great. They just need someone to program them.
Right, and in this case, a small team of people at times.
Yeah, the big thing is we're not worried about the hardware being the limiting factor.
Mm-hmm.
we're worried about
Hardware's there.
me not being able to do it all, and obviously I need someone to help with that. And so we've got some wonderful partners already.
So I'm trying to keep us on schedule here. Do you have a few more questions you want to touch base on there before we talk about the big announcement at the end?
I think there are a few questions that might be redundant questions that we might have touched on earlier. So for the sake of time, when we get this thing posted back up, you might want to rewatch if you missed out. There are also a few folks that are they're going above and beyond, talking about some of their good experiences with our products and the value they see in the products. So thank you so much.
To read it from here.
Yeah.
I just want to add, not to cut Saxon off here. If you have questions that you need a bit more detailed response, or a couple more questions you think of later and you want to reach out, feel free to reach out to us on Instagram at negative.supply. We're always standing by there. But also, it doesn't put me out at all if you want to send an email to contact@negativesupply.co, or to me personally. That's AJ, 2 letters, at negativesupply.co. I try to always make myself available to respond to questions, comments, concerns, and any and all of that. So it'll probably get a faster response sending an email or sending a message on Instagram, just because we are very busy here. But I'd be happy to have a chat with you if you need it.
There are some pretty good questions that might lead to our next segment.
Oh yeah, well that's what I'm most excited about.
Do we want to jump towards that? Anything you've got? If anybody have any last minute questions they want to dump into the chat? I see a wonderful question about dry plate, wet plate.
That's fun.
Yeah, I think let's take note of that. Do you want to, if you send us a DM with that, we'll make sure that we have a response for you and we can start sharing with folks.
Pictoriographica, is that how you said it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Pictoriographica, please send us a direct message. I would absolutely love to, have as much programming support as we can for alternative processes.
He's going to explain to me what that actually means, and I'll tell him
if
we'll
talk possible. About that off camera. But I mean, the reality is, I don't want to, because I don't know the programming language, I don't want to just say yes, but that's something that I would love for us to have if we could. And for those that didn't hear earlier, we were talking about ISO and aperture ranges. I personally think it's great to have a really wide ISO range, because you'll think, oh, it can go up really high for my Delta 3200. But if you want to shoot paper negatives at ISO 6, well, we need to have support for that. Or a film photography project has some really slow speed films. So we'd have support for those things. But likewise, you also want to have support for really, really small f-stops, not just for pinhole photography, but also exposure compensation if you're doing wet plates and things like that. So more about that later. We can get into the tech details, even one-on-one if you like. You can shoot me an email, or we can do another live if we need to at some point. But why don't we talk about these 2 exciting announcements in our last 5 minutes? Yeah,
I'll rapid fire answer the few questions that did just come through. Weather sealed, it's not going to be like waterproof. You can't go swimming with this and take meter readings underwater, sorry. We're working to make sure that it's at least splash proof, but like
some light gasket.
Yeah, if any of you have experience from an engineering standpoint in making devices like completely weather sealed, you know that that's a multi-year long process to have them rated with an IP rating like IP67. We're not to that point yet that we can start rating our products at all, and so we're going to be very selective with our language around what we do and don't recommend. Likely, we're not going to recommend that this particular meter gets wet. It's pocketable, throw it in your pocket if it's raining. There's also another question about the dome being replaceable. Yes.
Short answer is yes.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. Right now, we're actually doing custom vacuum forming on the domes. We're not sure how scalable that's going to be. If we do go with a different method for that, the good news is that we can choose or have a few more choices on the materials that the dome's made out of. Either way, we're very excited with how easily we think they should be replaceable. Charles has a good question about blue light.
Charles has a couple questions. The first one is, how low will ISO go? I'd say at least ISO 6.
Yeah, blue light metering. I'll have to look in the technical.
That's for dry plates.
Yeah, some of the technical details there, because it has an RGB and a lux sensor. I don't see that as a huge problem, but I need to clarify, because I'm maybe not the best expert. It could be that we need a filter over the dome. And that's actually something to consider. I think we should add that to our notes and see where that takes us.
And then Charles, if you have any other questions, you might be who was commenting as well on Instagram. If not, it seems like there's a few people looking for that kind of support. Charles, please feel free to email me directly, aj@negativesupply.co. We can have a chat about that. We'd love to make sure there's support for alternative processes as best as we can. And we'll do everything we can to make sure that that's the case.
I think it's time to talk about stretch goals. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think we're good. Do you want me to set it up? Do you want to knock it out of the park?
Let's see. So we've got 2. I guess to recap, more information to come on flash metering.
Yeah.
I guess we should, these are the people that are like really paying attention. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., we'll talk about flash metering.
Yeah, just hang on for that. But for today, I guess really as soon as this live wraps up, we've got a few more things to finish typing and sharing with the world. But 2 stretch goals going out simultaneously. If you've read our campaign fully through, you saw a glimpse of the stretch goals. And if you've seen some of the articles online, you've heard a couple snippets. But integrated shutter speed testing and something which is really exciting, especially, I have old Copal shutters that I would love to test. The one that's really exciting to me, though, as well, is a filter factor compensation for black and white contrast filters, neutral density filters, and color correction filters. So you can quickly and easily dial that in. So go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So which one are we putting at 100K?
Shutter speed testing.
Shutter speed testing. Okay. So shutter speed testing is something that we've been working on for a little while. There's actually a question up there that was asking about how it would work. Shutter speed testing, for those of you that don't know, it really means being able to measure the shutter timing on your older cameras to ensure that they're accurate. So if your camera says it's 1/1000th and you measure it and it's actually 1/800th, you can either choose to have your camera serviced in hopes of improving that, or you can just modify the settings on your camera or the meter to make up for it, to compensate for it. Our meter will have the ability to measure intervals. So it can actually measure the amount of time that light hits the sensor above or below a very specific threshold. And so if you were to open your camera and take off your lens and put a bright light behind your shutter and hold your meter in front of it and put it into this particular mode, you'd actually be able to measure the impulse of that shutter opening and closing. That particular impulse can then be displayed on the screen as a time. And so if it thinks if you've set your camera to 1/1000th, you run that and the impulse comes back as a different number, well, you've just measured your shutter. We need support, and we need a successful campaign above and beyond what we've already gotten to really finance the programming that goes into that. There are, I guess the best way to put it is we've already tested it in theory. We've got some things that have been wired together and they run. But what we really need is we really need the time to do some calibration and some testing of the actual meter doing those readings. So that's $100,000. If we can get to that point,
88.
Right, yeah. So we might get to that before the end of the day. So if anybody's on the fence and that's something you're interested in, I think you can feel pretty confident that we'll hit our goal there. So feel free to back if so inclined.
And then the next one is
the next
25?
Yeah, the next one is 125,000, which we know that's a little further into the future. We know that might take some time to get to. So please tell your friends. If you're on the fence, talk to us. We'd love to talk with you about why we think this might be something that is worth your time to back. But this particular one will give us the opportunity to program in compensation for filters. For most people, that would be like putting a red filter over your lens and knowing that you lose a little bit of light with that. For some people, it might be that you've just taken your shutter speed measurements and you know your camera is off by a third stop. You can use this filter factor compensation as exposure compensation, and you can adjust that accordingly.
And I would just say a lot of people out there might not use black and white contrast filters because of the filter factor, and remembering you have to, implement some level of exposure compensation to get a correct exposure. This hopefully would empower you to feel confident in doing so, or if you're already used to doing it, this is going to help you with some of that math, make it a bit simpler when you're in the field where you can stay in your flow state, not pull out a calculator, not have to Google literature on filters, or if you're like me, in the mountains in the middle of nowhere without internet service to check the filter factor on a filter. Mm-hmm. You're like putting the filter over the bulb and then metering with the filter and without. It gets to be really complicated. So this just allows you to stick to actually composing and creating a photograph, as opposed to having to, every time you want to take a picture, doing additional math. Mm-hmm. So that's something I usually keep a dark yellow and a medium red filter in my bags, but also you'll know if you're using color correction filters, some color correction filters, really strong warming filters, can have a third stop or more exposure compensation required. And this little handy tool will help you quickly dial those in. And of course, neutral densities, which I guess are a bit more straightforward, mm-hmm. but still nice to have that programmed in, because if you forget it and shoot a whole roll of film, you're not going to be happy with the results.
Yeah, and I think one of my favorite comments is from Charles. Charles said, 1 meter to rule them all. Obviously we've already covered that it's not a spot meter, but when it comes to getting as much functionality out of this particular meter as possible, that's our goal. We're building a platform that we can integrate some of these tools into a single device. If you're like me, you've probably got a phone, and maybe you've used your phone as a meter before. To me, that takes me out of the zone when I'm taking photos. This is meant to be a purist meter, something you can keep in your pocket all the time, and it does have some of these tools. There's some questions about reciprocity. I think that's something we want to look into. We might combine that with
that's funny.
The others. And then lastly, let's see.
Can I add something on that?
Yeah,
I know we're pretty much out of time, but if reciprocity compensation or reciprocity failure calculation is really important to you, we'd obviously like to hear, kind of like show of hands from the group, so to speak. But that's something that we have talked about internally for a while. And I guess I'd just kind of come back around and say, the LM1, if you back it now, if you back it in this campaign, you're not just getting the production unit. You're getting an indeterminate amount of future support for software updates and firmware updates and additional development. This isn't just a Saxon made it, it's a one and done thing. So if we determine that there's a lot of interest or demand for something like that, we'll definitely consider it. Nothing is a no with the LM1.
Yeah, I think it's great. Brian says might make him switch from his M6 to an M2. It's funny, Brian, you mentioned that. I actually bought a Leica M4 a couple of years ago, thankfully right before they spiked in price. But I'd been using actually my FM2, my Nikon FM2 for so long that had an integrated meter. When I bought the M4, I realized I needed a meter of some sort, and that's exactly what I think started the conversation between AJ and I for a handheld meter. I had the plastic Fantastic that we're all familiar with, and it was a little big for my pockets, and it just didn't have the same fit and finish as my Leica. And I hate to say it, this isn't just a meter for Leica shooters, but I think this is hopefully a meter from a design standpoint for each and every person that appreciates devices that are built well and hold up next to nice cameras.
In like the same period of time, Saxon got an M4, I got an M3 that also does not have an integrated meter. And I did get one of the on top of camera slide on meters, and cool, compact, lightweight, all that fun stuff. But Saxon's exactly right. With a background that is more deeply rooted in incident meter reading, I found myself getting tricked a few times, or rather the meter getting tricked and me not really knowing how best to compensate for it. Now I know, because I spent so much time and have ruined a few really important shots.
Awesome Cameras asked if we can put Snake on it, the game. Literally, Dan Rubin and I were talking about putting Snake or Pong or something on the meter. Not sure about that, but yeah, we might give some people the keys to the car one day and let them put whatever they want on it.
All right.
Thanks, Brian.
The Snake game. Oh my gosh. Well, really, I think, is that about all for you? Any other questions? Do we have anything?
We got a couple things about like incident reading guide or recommend one. Absolutely. That's something we want to work on.
That's a resource we can do.
There was another one about videos with a hands-on. I think the important thing is to note that we will have a video hands-on, hopefully tomorrow or by the end of the week. I wouldn't wait around to back until that particular video comes out, because by that point I think the early birds will be gone. I guess let's wrap it up. Let me cover just a few things real quick. In case you missed it, stretch goals, we've got 2 at 100,000. We're going to be able to do the shutter speed testing. That way you can take your older cameras and verify that the shutters are accurate using the LM1. And then number 2 is 125,000. That is filter compensation / exposure compensation. A couple things to note. Can we just say it's going to have flash metering now, or do we need to wait till 9 in the morning?
We'll talk more about that tomorrow. There's been so many questions, comments, concerns about flash metering on every platform we have. We've heard all of you. We've also been talking about flash metering internally since December or January. So this is something that is not a new conversation.
We need the support, though, of the community for flash metering. There's a lot of work that has to go into it. There's a little bit of programming and there's a little bit of hardware. So please, if you're on the fence about backing this particular project and you need flash metering, back it now. If by the end of the project you're still not satisfied with it, you can revoke your pledge. You can do that on any Kickstarter. You don't get charged till the end, but back it now so that we know that you are interested.
Well, and the short answer here is that I think by the end of the week, people are going to be very surprised with all the features packed into this. As what Petapixel called it, I think they said a mighty small meter, and
that's great.
I love that.
Yeah, we're trying our best too. So keep us posted if you have anything that you need. I guess to circle back around, you've got 2 days, a little less than 2 days on early bird. The brass models are going pretty quickly. Most of the lower numbered units on the special edition are gone. If you want a special edition and you prefer to get in on it sooner, which I'm one, if I'm buying a special edition print, I want the lowest number possible. So definitely look into that. The mid-tier, the slate and the green, they're beautiful. I don't think enough people have seen them yet because we don't have enough backers on the slate and the green and the metallic silver. Take a look at our Instagram today. We're going to have more photos up for the slate, the green, and the silver. But by all means, you can adjust your pledge if you do like those. No pressure. I think that's it. I think probably going to be back with another live in maybe a week or so, but look out tomorrow.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining again. AJ Holmes and Saxon McClama at the Negative Supply headquarters in California. We are so gracious for your support thus far. If you haven't backed, please consider backing our Kickstarter before the early bird period ends at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Thursday morning. Thanks again.
See you later.